Hello friends, today we're going to be doing Genesis chapter 36, 37, 38, 39, and 40. As you know, yesterday we did the previous 5 chapters, and today we'll be doing the next 5 chapters. And we're going to get straight into it. This is the account, beginning on chapter 36. This is the account of the family line of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the woman of Canaan, Adah, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholibamah, daughter of Anah, and granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite, also Basemath, daughter of Ishmael, and sister of Nebaioth. Adah bore Eliphaz to Esau, Basemath bore Reuel, and Oholibamah bore Jeush, Jalem, and Korah. These were the sons of Esau who were born to him in Canaan. Esau took his wives and daughters and all the members of his household, as well as his livestock and all his other animals and all the good he had acquired in Canaan, and moved to a land some distance from his brother Jacob. Their possessions were too great for them to remain together. The land where they would stay in could not support them both because of the livestock. So Esau, that is Edom, settled in the hill country of Seir. This is the account of the family line of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in the hill country of Seir. These are the names of Esau's son: Eliphaz, the son of Esau's wife Adah, and Reuel, the son of Esau's wife Basemath, the son of Eliphaz. Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz, Esau's sons. Eliphaz also had a concubine named Timnah, who bore him Amalek. These were grandsons of Esau's wife Adah. The sons of Reuel: Nabath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These were grandsons of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Esau's wife Oholibamah, daughter of Anah, and granddaughter of Zibeon, whom she bore to Esau: Jeush, Jalem, and Korah. These were the chiefs among Esau's descendants, the son of Eliphaz, the firstborn of Esau: chiefs Teman, Omar, Zepho, Kenaz, Korah, Gatam, and Amalek. These were the chiefs descended from Eliphaz and Edom. They were grandsons of Adah. The sons of Esau's son Reuel: chiefs Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These were the chiefs descended from Reuel and Edom. They were grandsons of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Esau's wife Oholibamah: chiefs Jeush, Jalem, and Korah. These were the chiefs descended from Esau's wife Oholibamah, daughter of Anah. These were the sons of Esau, that is Edom, and these were their chiefs. These were the sons of Seir, the Horite, who were lying in the region: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. These sons of Seir and Edom were Horite chiefs. The sons of Lotan: Hori and Homan. Timnah was Lotan's sister. The sons of Shobal: Alvan, Manahath, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. The sons of Zibeon: Aya and Anah. This is the Anah who discovered the hot springs in the desert while he was grazing the donkeys of his father Zibeon. The children of Anah: Dishon and Oholibamah, daughter of Anah. The sons of Dishon: Hamdan, Eshban, Ethron, and Karen. The sons of Ezer: Belhan, Zarvan, and Achan. The sons of Dishan: Uz and Aran. These were the Horite chiefs: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. These were the Horite chiefs according to their divisions in the land of Seir. These were the kings who reigned in Edom before any Israelite king reigned. Bela, son of Beor, became king of Edom. His city was named Dinhabah. When Bela died, Jobab, son of Zerah from Bozrah, succeeded him as king. When Jobab died, Husham from the land of the Temanites succeeded him as a king. When Husham died, Hadad, son of Bedad, who defeated Midian in the country of Moab, succeeded him as king. His city was named Avith. When Hadad died, Samlah from Masrekah succeeded him as king. When Samlah died, Shaul from Rehoboth on the river succeeded him as king. When Shaul died, Baal-Hanan, son of Akbar, succeeded him as king. When Baal-Hanan, son of Akbar, died, Hadad succeeded him as king. His city was named Paul, and his wife's name was Mehetabel, daughter of Matred, the daughter of Mezahab. These were the chiefs descended from Esau by name, according to their clans and regions: Timnah, Alvah, Jahath, Oholibamah, Elah, Pinan, Kenaz, Teman, Mibzah, Magdiel, and Iram. These were the chiefs of Edom according to their settlements in the land they occupied. This is the family line of Esau, the father of the Edomites. If I butchered some of the names, which I bet I did, I apologize. Jacob, chapter 37. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. So here comes more butchering of names. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to them." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his fathers as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here." And the man answered, "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan, but they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, and there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchant came by, his brother pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him up to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brother and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal had devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hera. There, Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shur. He married her and made love to her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son, who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son, and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son, and named him Shelah. It was at Kezbeh that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the child would not be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up," for he thought he may die too, just like his brother. So Tamar went to live in her father's household. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shur, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hera, the Adulamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Anem, which is on the road to Timnah, for she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll give you a young goat from my flock," he said. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your sill and its cord and the staff in your hand," she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on the widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adulamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman, but he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road of Anem?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said, and she added, "See if you recognize whose sill and cord and staff these are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah," and he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb as she was giving birth. One of them put out his hand, so the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it onto his wrist. This one came out first, but when he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she said, "So this is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was named Zerah. Chapter 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered, and he lived in the household of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he had owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care, with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the household. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this household than I am. My master was withheld nothing from me, except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day, he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of this house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me." He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Chapter 40. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard. In the same prison where Joseph was confined, the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected, so he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand. This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will be put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread, and the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but he impaled the chief baker just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. So that's the end of those 5 chapters, and now we're going to talk about them. Got a yawn. So, yeah, we begin with Edom, or Esau's, called Edom. We begin with his family tree. So the Edomites were descendants of Esau, that's obvious. And they lived south and east of the Dead Sea. The country featured rugged and desolate wilderness, and there were several major trade routes led through Edom and brought wealth to the area. During Israel's exodus from Egypt, God told the Israelites to leave the Edomites alone because they were relatives, but Edom refused to let them into the land, and later the Edomites became bitter enemies of King David. The nations of Edom and Israel shared the same ancestor, Isaac, and the same border. but the Israelites looked down on the Edomites because they had intermarried with the Canaanites. That's just some Edomite info. And then, the title chief, which we see throughout the family trees, these were the chiefs. Like, these were the Horite chiefs, or, these were the chiefs among Esau's descendants. Chiefs is equivalent to head of the clan. So, example, my family, Washington, my father would be the head of the clan since he is the oldest. And then next in line would be me to be head of the clan since I am the oldest son. If that makes sense. And so we see that Joseph is given a ornate robe, a coat of colors actually, and that showed extreme royalty and favor, and it was a symbolism of favoritism in Jacob's eyes. And Jacob is Joseph's father, don't forget that. So yeah, coat of colors were extremely expensive, and it showed favoritism, and were usually given to people with royalty. And so this aggravated, since Joseph and his brothers never got along, this aggravated Joseph's brothers, and only few of them more, and would make them even more angrier than they were already with Joseph. So you gotta think about this. A little thing to learn from that is it's almost, sometimes it can be impossible not to have a favorite child. There's one child who's going to nag you over and over, and it's going to annoy you, which I'm that child. I nag people over and over. And then there's going to be the other child who's chill and relaxed. And then could be other children that, but, some children aren't going to live up to your expectations. Some children aren't going to live up to, your chores that you assign them. But then there's going to be that one child who does everything correctly, and you're probably going to show favoritism to him or her. And so, favoritism could be impossible, not to do sometimes. But you have to be careful how you minimize treating that child compared to the other children, because it can result in jealousy and anger. And we've seen jealousy multiple times. We saw it with Joseph and his brothers. We saw it with Laban's sons and Jacob. We saw it with Cain and Abel. So we've seen it since the beginning of the Bible. And then, Joseph's the anger, the brothers of Joseph, their anger only got fueled more whenever Joseph told his dreams to them. And this was because Joseph said it in a very condescending attitude. He had he was bragging, he was a braggart, and no one likes a braggart. No one likes anyone who brags. And so this only just fueled the fire. This only just made the fire even bigger. So Joseph, got into a big mess because of that, and he learned to thank God for what he had rather than use it to brag about it and be condescending with it. And so we can learn not to be condescending from the story, because he gets thrown down into a cistern because of it. The brothers were worried about bearing the guilt of Joseph's death, so Judah gave an option that was not right, but would take the guilt off of them. And that was that it would make them innocent of murder, that they never murdered Joseph. But as we were talking about last video, two wrongs don't make a right. If, there was something evil, you could do an act that would make it less evil, but that act was also wicked, and so wickedness is not going to heal wickedness. And no matter if it's wickedness to defeat wickedness, God's still not going to like wickedness, whether you like it or not. So it is still not the right action whenever you fight evil with evil. His brothers probably thought Joseph would be killed as a slave, and so they were willing to let cruel slave owners, take him also. And this was also, they probably went on this really long month trip through the desert, really rough. Joseph was probably on chains being dragged through the desert by these slave owners, and then sold in Egypt eventually to Potiphar. And so, but luckily and graciously, God had other plans for Joseph. As we can see, he was, got put in charge of the prison, got put in charge of Potiphar's household almost, and later on he even gets put in charge of Egypt's land distribution and stuff. So Reuben was more worried about himself rather than Joseph. As we see in chapter 37, Reuben is like, the boy isn't there, where can I turn now? He's not like, oh no, Joseph is gone, I'm so sad, he's probably dead. He was like, where am I going to turn now? Now I am filled with guilt, and now I can get in trouble. And he was not really worried about Joseph. And so, in a situation, don't just consider yourself, but you got to consider others. And Reuben probably was going to go back to, receive Joseph, and bring him to Jacob to, pay for his sin that he did early on in the book, which was sleep with one of the concubines of Jacob. And so that's my theory, though. It doesn't specifically say that in the Bible, but, it could be true. And he wasn't punished right away for that sin where he slept with the concubine of Jacob, but, So, Jacob's sons deceived him into thinking Jacob was dead. He was like, a ferocious animal got him, showed him the ornate robe with blood on it. It was lamb's blood. So they covered up their action, yeah. Even though Jacob didn't know that he was being deceived, this does show that deception, your sin will whip back around you. Jacob started experiencing the painful consequences of deceit, something he was very familiar with. So, sin has a way to get right back around at you. And we see that in chapter, we see Judah sin real bad in chapter 38. But, moving on. We've seen this happen multiple times so far in the book. Someone tears their clothes, wears a sackcloth, or it could also be called a burlap. And these were signs of mourning, and similar to how we wear black today, we use it as a sign of mourning. And they wore burlap and sackcloth though, and tore their original clothes. So that was just a sign of mourning. That's what Jacob did when he thought Joseph was dead. That's what Reuben did actually as well. Whenever he couldn't find he couldn't find Joseph in the cistern, thought he was going to get in trouble. So Joseph was brought into a different culture, aka Egypt. Many different things. Going into a different culture could be weird. Different culture from where he was from. The main thing he saw, though, was spiritual blindness. If we were to go to, Asian countries, I say, they follow Hinduism in certain parts of India is the one that follows Hinduism. When we go to India, we may see they follow Hinduism, and anywhere we go, we may see the spiritual blindness. And when we do see this spiritual blindness, we bring sight to those people. Kind of like how Paul in the book of Acts was blinded and then given sight. We do the same thing to people. People are spiritually blind, and so we give them sight, aka spreading the word of God to them. And that's what we all should do. So, moving on to chapter 38, which was a very weird chapter, but Judah has a lack of integrity, we see that, and which resulted in family strife and deception. And we see Joseph does have a Joseph does have integrity, which makes him, and he makes wise choices, and it shows a godly character, and his faithfulness was rewarded. So, yeah, Joseph and Judah, you can compare the two. Judah, a very deceptive man, doesn't really care about sin, just regards it. And Joseph, he does care about sin. He doesn't regard it, but he pays attention to it. He noticed whenever Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him, he's like, no, get away from me, woman. I am my, master's servant. I'm the highest of this household, and I will not disobey my master, nor will I disobey God. For if I, fell into your temptation, that would be sinning against God. So he was very careful about it. So we see a law, mentioned in chapter 38, and it says it in the Bible, my Bible at least. It says the law about marrying a widow in the family is explained in Deuteronomy, chapters 25, verses 5 through 10. Its purpose was to ensure that a childless widow would have a son who would receive her late husband's inheritance, and who in turn would care for her. Because Judah's sons, Tamar's husband, had no children, there was no family line through which the inheritance and the blessing of the covenant could continue. God killed Onan because he refused to fulfill his obligation to his brother and to Tamar. And that's the law about the widow, which is also mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 through 10, if you want to look more on it. So, we see Judah do a little act of hypocrisy in this chapter as well. He slept with a prostitute, but was willing to call out and execute Tamar as soon as he figured out she was pregnant and a prostitute. And why did he do this though? Well, in Canaan, a woman's most important function was seen as bearing children, who would perpetuate the family line. To ensure the children belonged to her husband, a bride was expected to be a virgin, and a wife was expected to have relations with only her husband. If a wife committed adultery, she could be executed. Some women, however, did not belong to families. They might serve as shrine prostitutes supported by offerings, or common prostitutes supported by the men who hired the adulteress, no one's bloodlines. Judah saw no harm having sexual relations with a prostitute, but was willing to execute Tamar because if she was pregnant as a result of prostitution, his grandchild would not be part of his family. Judah was too blinded by the fact of keeping inheritance in his family that he overlooked his sexual morality, and that didn't even cross his mind. So, but Tamar was the one who acted to provide him with legal heirs, though. By seducing him, she acted more in the spirit of the law than he did when he refused to send his third son to her, which was like Shelah. Pretty sure. Yeah, Shelah. And so, but, this doesn't mean prostitution is good. It's actually condemned as a sin. And it's one of the, bad sins that God specifically talks about a lot. And if this story does have a moral, it is that faithfulness to family obligation is important. Despite the failures of Judah and Tamar, that Judah and Tamar are direct ancestors of Jesus Christ. And we can see that in, I believe it's like Matthew? First chapter of Matthew? Alright. So we see they make this little thing, the sill and the stuff, She asked for a sill, a staff, and all that. And this identification sill was to use for authenticate legal documents, usually a unique design carved in stone and worn on a ring or necklace, so worn jewelry pretty much, garments. The sill was used by the wealthy and powerful to mark clay or wax. Because Tamar had Judah's sill, she could prove beyond a doubt that he had been with her. So that was kind of smart of Tamar. Evil, but smart. Judah did move away, though, to have Tamar killed. When she was revealed she was pregnant, Judah had no remorse over his sin, yet treated Tamar harshly because of hers. So we got to think someone's sin, whenever we treat someone harshly of the sin, whenever we judge someone not righteously, we can judge someone righteously. And I'll explain that in one video, but another video pretty much is like not judging someone out of evil, not judging someone or condescending against them, but saying, how to stop doing a sin and saying this is the sin you may have a problem with, not judging them like, oh, you suck, you're going to go to hell because of that sin. It's not what we do. But whenever we see sins in someone else that we hate, and we condescend against them, and we call them out for it, and we bring shame upon them, it could be sins that we have dealt with too. For example, Tamar and Judah, I keep forgetting Judah's name, I want to say Jacob, but it's Judah. They both committed sexual immorality. Prostitution. So, Judah bought the prostitute, and Tamar was the prostitute. We see that she covers herself with a veil, and Judah doesn't know it, so because she has a veil over her face. And so, he overlooked his sin because of someone else's sin. And sexual morality could be a common one. You could go call out people for doing sexual morality all the time, yet you could be doing it behind closed doors. Moving on to chapter 39, next section. So, this is some historian aspects of this book now. We've been going over, especially Genesis, especially the Old Testament, we would see some historian aspects in the book explaining like family trees and geological, aspects as well. Luke is a historian, pretty much it's like a historian perspective of the gospel too. That's why it's my favorite. Luke's my favorite gospel. So, some say Joseph arrived in Egypt during the period of the Hyksos rulers, which they were foreigners who ruled Egypt for almost 150 years, and this would explain why they treated Joseph so well, because Joseph himself was a foreigner. This is going to explain why Joseph, got promoted a lot, not only by Potiphar, but by the prison warden and later on Pharaoh. Pharaoh, mentioning Pharaoh now, it was a general name for kings of Egypt. It was a little like king or president to address, the country's leader. The Pharaoh who was placed in charge of Joseph is not the same Pharaoh in Exodus that the Israelites depart from. So, going on more about, history and culture of Egypt. Ancient Egypt was a land of great contrast. People were either rich beyond measure or was poverty-stricken. There wasn't much middle ground. Joseph found himself serving Potiphar, an extremely rich officer in Pharaoh's service. Rich families like Potiphar's had elaborate homes with beautiful gardens. They enjoyed live entertainment. Oh, my nose. They enjoyed live entertainment at home as they chose delicious fruits from expensive bowls. They surrounded themselves with alabaster vases, paintings, beautiful rugs, and hand-carved chairs. Dinner was served on golden tableware, and the rooms were lighted with gold lampstands. So we see when Potiphar's wife attempts to seduce Joseph, we see Joseph resists by saying it's a sin against God. And so this is a good thing that Joseph did that, and this is something we should do as well when there's any sin, not just temptation or lust or sexual morality. When any sin comes to us, we have to refuse it because it's a sin against God. Any act of sin is an act of disobedience towards God, no matter how big the sin is. Unless it's blasphemy, mark of the beast, and suicide, the sins, can be forgiven. Those three sins cannot, though. Mark of the beast isn't around here yet, though. One day it will be, and I mean, if Revelations does come in this lifetime, you're going to have to really stick to God and be loyal to Him. And if the rapture is real, hopefully you get pulled up by the rapture, because the 7 years of tribulation is not described as fun. But the reason I say the rapture may not be real is because it's not specifically like called out, but it's like these weird descriptions throughout the New Testament's given, maybe even in the Old Testament. I haven't read all of the Old Testament, but we'll get into that one day. Rapture's a very interesting topic, though. There will be two plowing in the field, and then there will be one. So, yeah, remember, sin is always disobedience towards God. So, Joseph avoided and even ran from Potiphar's wife. I think that's kind of funny. He just ran from Potiphar's wife. But he did left his robe, and that didn't get him into a good situation afterwards. So, sometimes just avoiding temptation isn't enough, but instead running can be. So, if a woman comes up to you, tries to lust, if you run from her, there's really no reason to run back. Really embarrassing too, but it shouldn't be embarrassing at all because you're doing it for God. You don't want to be lusted, you don't want to be tempted, so you ran from that temptation. I said one day that next time I'm tempted by a sin, if it's not dark outside, I'm gonna go and run out in the streets. And one day that day will come. It'll be really funny though. Taking a jog because of sin. So, we see Joseph get placed in prison now. And Joseph is my favorite story of Genesis, by the way. Also, the one where Jacob wrestles with God because he gets named Israel. He struggles with God, and in my opinion, we are all Israel because we all struggle with God. We don't struggle against God, but we struggle with God, and God struggles with us. That means we go through these struggles with God. That's what that means. Not, we're struggling to have faith in Him. We're struggling with Him. He struggles with us, and we struggle together through things. So, yeah, we see Joseph gets sent to prison, and if you don't know what a prison is, they were extremely grim places with vile conditions, especially back then. Nowadays, some prisons, especially Norway prisons, can be really nice. Either way, you don't want to be forced into a prison. But they were used to house forced laborers, or like Joseph, the accused who were awaiting trial. Prisoners were guilty until proven innocent. Kind of back, nowadays it's innocent until proven guilty, and now back then it was guilty until proven innocent. But and there was no right to a speedy trial. Many prisoners never made it to court. My nose is a little stuffy, excuse me. And this was because trials were held at the whim of the ruler. So Joseph was in prison for a long time before he even appeared before Pharaoh, and then he was called out to interpret a dream, but not to stand trial. So even though Joseph got himself into a hopeless situation, he still kept a positive attitude and was even promoted by the prison warden. And so we see even when when situations seem overwhelming, when our actions can seem worthless that God is always with us. We are Israel. We will struggle with God. Alright? God will struggle along with us. We'll go through these struggles together. We are Israel. So, when we're having a terrible situation, we can use that to grow closer toward God. We can use that to grow closer with God, and take advantage of situations and turn it for the better good, not for the worse bad. So, I say that worse bad as in W-O-R-S-T. If you know what grammar is, then you would get my joke. Anyway, even though... Okay, I already read that note. The baker was in charge of making Pharaoh's food, that's obvious. And the cupbearer, though, might not be as obvious, but he tasted Pharaoh's wine before giving it to Pharaoh. So, since he was a king, there's the chance that someone could have poisoned him. So he would take a cup, this is a candle, and I'm the cupbearer, I'm about to give it to Pharaoh though. I drink it, make sure there's no poison, and then I give it to Pharaoh. And that's what a cupbearer did. So, these trusted men, though, were accused of serious wrongs. Later, the baker gets executed, and the cupbearer is released. So, when Joseph interpreted dreams, he always turned the attention toward God. He always gave God recognition as well. So when we have the opportunities, we give the recognition to God. When someone says, "Oh, thank you for telling me about God," you should say, "Well, through God, through me, God spoke through me. He gave me the wisdom, and He told me to talk to you." The Holy Spirit was like, "Hey, this man wants to hear about God." And so, therefore, I listen to God, I listen to the Holy Spirit, and talk to that person, and you give God the recognition for it. You say, "Don't thanks me," or "Thanks me." We were speaking about grammar earlier, I'm messing up real bad on it. Don't thank me, thank God, alright? If you go up as a pastor, and you say, "You only know about God because of me," that's not going to look really good on you, first of all, whenever you get up to those pearly white gates, ready to be judged by the thousands and thousands of the Lord's holy ones. That's not going to look good at all. And secondly, you're giving recognition to yourself. You're not giving any recognition to God. You can't just say, "Oh, it's because of me that you know about God." Well, did you write the Bible, first of all? No, you didn't. So, hate to break it to you prideful people, but it's not all about you. So when the cupbearer was released, he forgot about Joseph and, remained ungrateful to him. Yet Joseph kept his faith, and he was ready when the time came to be released. And when we feel overlooked by others, we should not be anxious, we should not worry or be saddened, but instead we should put our trust and faith over towards God. We should be like, God, these people have overlooked me, but you have not. You know, through your eyes, I am a valued person, just like all these persons that have overlooked me. All these peoples that overlook me, I'm just as good as them, but I'm also just as bad as them, because we all sin. Alright? God doesn't overlook a single one of us. People may overlook each other, but God doesn't. That's what's so great about God. He's all loving. He's never going to overlook you. He's never going to say, oh, you did this sin, and this other person didn't do that sin, so you're going to get a worse punishment. No. He says, you both sin, but you both can be free. You can both receive eternal salvation. Why would I overlook you because of a single sin, of a single mistake you did? Now, turn to Christ and repent. So, God's not going to overlook you. But it was quite short today compared to the last two videos. Hour and a half and 2 hours with the last ones. My goodness. So, now we have 2 more videos on Genesis, and then we have the intimidating Genesis summary. And the reason I call it intimidating, my little sister's in here, by the way. You want to be in the video?
I know, for my head.
Oh, yes. You have gems on your head. My bed's a mess, ignore that. But, yeah, 2 more videos of Genesis. I'm going to do Romans tomorrow instead of Malachi, because I want to, I really want to, DC, my buddy who does the videos with me sometimes, said he wants to do James. So, we're going to be doing James after Romans, and then we'll move on to Ephesians and Matthew. And so, we cannot, overlook sin in others. We cannot judge others because of the sin. We cannot do sexual morality. We cannot lie or deceive. And this is what we learn out of, these 5 chapters we just read. So, now, since we're done, we're going to do the prayer. And as soon, as we did prayer, I'm going to explain to you what we do every time we go Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Learn it from my church. So we're going to do just that. Ayla, you want to pray with us?
What?
Huh?
What?
Alright, we're going to clap our hands, alright? As soon as I clap my hands, you clap yours, alright? Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Lord, thank you for gathering us here today. Thank you for giving us wisdom to spread your word today. And thank you for giving us wisdom to understand what you want to tell us today, Lord. I just want to pray that people can overcome sexual morality, deception, deceiving others, that people cannot overlook others and not judge others, because we are all sinners in your eyes, Lord, and every sin is equal upon each other. And so there's no difference between any of the humans, but even because we sin, you don't overlook us, and that's what's so great and loving about you, Lord. You graciously accept us no matter what sin we have committed. So, in your heavenly name I pray, amen. She ran off, didn't she? Anyway, that's the end of the video. In Jesus' name, God bless y'all.